Welcome, everyone, to the next episode of the Search Off the Record podcast. Our plan is to talk a bit about what's happening at Google Search, how things work behind the scenes, and who knows, maybe have some fun along the way. My name is John Mueller. I'm a search advocate on the search relations team here at Google in Switzerland. I'm joined today again by Martin and Gary, who are also both on the search relations team. Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Bonjour.
Woohoo! So, Gary, you've been talking a lot about search indexing. What's the next step? When are you finally going to be talking about ranking? Maybe today?
Wait, I was not told I'm going to start this.
John said that twice. He walked through the procedure twice.
Well, I was not paying attention, as usual. Okay, thought collection. What's next? Well, we pretty much finished with indexing. We touched upon a little bit on crawling. Plus, crawling is not all that interesting.
What?
Either. So I think the last thing that we can talk about is serving.
What is serving?
It's serving results. Duh.
So, but wait. So we have built an index, and now we're serving results. So does that kind of, do ranking as well, or nah?
Yes. And that's why we don't talk all that much about serving, because the ranking is actually happening in serving when we receive the queries and returning results from our index. So it's full of those highly guarded secrets that we don't necessarily like to share. That said, there are a bunch of things that I believe that we can share, either because if you attended computer science classes, then it's highly likely that you covered some of these things in your information retrieval classes. Like, for example, I know that Pandu, who is our chief ranking person, I don't know what's his title. He's teaching information retrieval at Stanford. Well, I don't know if he's still doing it, but he was. And information retrieval is a thing that you can learn. And conceptually, it's not that different from what we are doing. Basically, what's taught in those computer science classes are actually very similar to what's happening in our serving infrastructure. Now, there are a few terms that we don't like to mention because, well, we don't want to.
PageRank.
Not PageRank. Well, that's a different thing. We don't want to mention PageRank for different reasons. But sure. But going back to the higher level serving system, what we start with is a query from the user. And that query is traveling in the serving system two ways. One is going down and one is going up. When going down, it passes several systems, which I think we can cover, or at least most of them. One would be the query parsing and understanding system. Then it's passed on to kind of like a router system that passes on the parsed query to the different indexes that we have. So, for example, this is important for universal search. The query is passed on to the web index. It's passed on to the image index, video, news, and so on. All the different indexes that we have for different file formats or different kind of content. Then in case of web, the parsed query travels down to our serving index, actually. And that's where some of the magic happens, some of the magic that we already covered. For example, in a previous episode, we were talking about posting list. We are going to dedicate more time to this in a future episode. But based on the posting list, we find the results that might satisfy the user's query. We select those documents, and then we start pushing them back up. Now, the ranking system kicks in and starts ranking the results that we've retrieved from our index. Here, you can think of topicality, for example, essentially relevance, that plays a huge factor in ranking. Then the quality of the results and the content, and I don't remember how we say it anymore, but probably hundreds of other signals are taken into account for determining an order for the results that we retrieve from our serving index. And then it goes further up in the stack. Now we reach that router again that was sending the queries to the different index tiers. Here we wait a little bit for the other indexes' responses. And if we get anything in the allotted time, then we would try to push the received results among the web results. That essentially what universal search is. And if we manage to do that, good. If we didn't, then we just return web results and that's it. Going further up, there's not much else there. We would get some ads responses from the ad server, although I have literally no idea at all what it does and how it does it. I just know that it sometimes serves ads. And we put the results in a template. Think of J template or C template that are public templating systems. And then the user gets the results page in HTML form. And this is the very high level overview of how serving works. In future episodes, I'm planning to go into more detail about certain or specific systems that we have. Like, for example, I think it would be interesting to cover the query parsing or how we actually find results in our index for certain queries. But I already talked for 12 minutes and perhaps I should stop.
So cool. Okay, but like all of this happens within milliseconds, right? It's like...
That's right.
Okay.
It's blazing fast. So every system has an allotted time for responding. And if they don't respond in that time, then we would not wait for them unless they are critical for the page. So for example, for web results, we would always wait because without results, it's kind of weird. But for example, if the ad server doesn't respond fast enough, then we would not wait for that. We would just give the user the results without ads. Or if Mappack, for example, didn't arrive in the allotted time for the map server or Google Maps server to respond, then we would just not put maps among the web results. Plus, the second thing is that there's lots of caching going on. Like if people search for cookies in my area, then they are very likely routed to the same data center because of the geographic area, and it just makes sense to route them to the same data center. And there we would very likely, after the first cookie query, we would return results from a cache. So we wouldn't even go down the whole stack and find new results for a certain time, which is order of minutes. But still, it helps a lot with giving users speedier results.
So multiple people would get the same cookies? That sounds terrible.
Multiple people, no, that sounds amazing if I bake the cookies.
Oh, like people in your neighborhood get the same batch of cookies. Oh, okay.
Yes.
That makes a lot of sense.
That's correct. And Martin might also get some cookies.
God, yes, I'm really looking forward to get some cookies.
No,
fun.
Not now. Not now.
Oh, no cookies for me.
We care about speed, but not that much, right?
We do. Yeah.
So just to kind of recap and make sure I understand everything right. So first of all, someone goes to Google and types in cookies near me or cookie recipe from Gary's blog that doesn't exist or something like that.
Thanks.
Then our systems would go off and try to understand this query first.
Yes.
It's like, oh, cookies. That could be like 1 cookie or 5 cookies. It's like, those are kind of synonyms. I think Paul Haar did a cool session on this at some event that we recorded. I don't know, was it like 2 years back now? But the recording is on our channel. So make sure to watch all of the videos on our channel and you'll find that recording about synonyms and how we pick things up. I thought that was pretty cool. That happens right up there, right? It's like...
Yes.
Cool. Okay, so then all of these synonyms or whatever, the understood query is passed on to some big mixer. And there we stir the pot a little bit and hand off this query to all of the different indexes. And we wait a little bit, but not really a lot. And the results that come back, we try to rank them and then essentially show them to the user.
Yes, that's the simple version.
So cool. Okay. There's like a lot of stuff that has to happen within milliseconds. I wonder how they wrote that PHP code to work so fast.
Well, it's not PHP, so...
Oh, it's ASP, of course. It's like for...
C Sharp.
It's C and C++.
Oh, okay. Wow. That's like complex. Cool. Okay.
I see.
You see?
You didn't. Oh,
I did.
man.
I did. I went there.
The heck would you do that for?
I don't know. I wanted to increment the pun count, like C++ increments on C.
So it's like D. C++ is essentially D. But I thought D was another programming language. I don't know.
There is a programming language D, I think, if I remember correctly.
It's so confusing. It's like these engineers, it's like they should just like settle down and get to work rather than inventing new stuff all the time. I don't know.
How dare they?
How dare they?
Fascinating.
So, Martin, you had a really cool session at the Search Central Live. Well, actually, you had all of the sessions, but you also had a really cool one. Wait, let me frame that differently.
No, that was perfect. That was
amazing.
Perfect.
That was great.
Just leave it like that.
We need to keep
that was
that
great.
in.
You had the middle session as well, where you did a really cool case study with someone from the community. I thought that was really neat. Can you tell us a little bit more?
Thanks, John. So, yeah, you have been part of the Search Central Live event that we did recently. For those of you who haven't seen it, you can check that out on our YouTube channel. If you go to youtube.com/Google Search Central, you'll find the video recording from that event. There will be more events in the future. And I wanted to try something out that we haven't done before. I have seen a talk at another event from Christina Azarenko, where she walked people through how she approached a specific kind of like SEO debugging or technical SEO troubleshooting. And I was wondering like, oh, so what would be a good case where she had to debug some technical SEO problem that she could share with us? And then she came up with something that I have seen multiple times in the wild, like multiple websites had suffered this specific problem. So I thought, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It would be super cool if she could share that with the audience. And I think that's one of the beautiful things with virtual events. We're all at home. We are comfortable at our own machines, at our own computers. So it's a little easier to actually do these kind of live debugging situations and setups. And she said yes. And so we had a session, I think it's like a little over 20 minutes, where she debugged a problem with lazy loading images on a page. Now, we didn't want to like highlight or shame the website that was affected. So I built a fake website that actually exposed the same problem. That was surprisingly hard because I built the setup and then it just worked. And I'm like, oh, dang. So I had to deliberately break the website and then I broke it in the wrong way. And then Christina's like, but that's not what happened there. I'm like, I know, I'm sorry. And then I had to like fix that and then break it in the right way. So you have to break the website, but in the right way.
I think you just know too much about how to make good websites. It's like trying to be like a blind person. It's like really tricky.
Very unfortunately, it gets easier to build good websites. Yeah, this is terrible, isn't it?
It's cool.
And it was really cool to see how she guided us through the tools and how she used the different tools to spot things and what tools she used. And we got lots of questions like, what is the tool that you're using there? And how did you do that? And how did you find out this from the audience while we were doing it? So that was also really cool. And I would love to do more of these in the future. I haven't worked out how we can make that happen, but I'm pretty sure the community out there probably has lots of case studies that we can look into and share with others to share how people are using the tools, how are people approaching the problem, and how can you solve the problem effectively.
That sounds cool.
So that would be something that... Do you think we should do more of that?
Yeah. I mean, it's not that you need the challenge of creating broken websites, but I kind of think the idea of showing people how to use existing tools to improve things or to debug things, to diagnose issues, I think that's super cool. Because it's one thing to kind of read about it on our blog and it's like, oh, you should just use this tool and it'll tell you what to do. And something completely different to be in front of the tool and say, well, what does this mean? Like, what do I have to interpret here? What's my next step?
And it's a bit of a SEO murder mystery kind of situation. You just come to the crime scene and something is broken or hurt or dead. And then you have to figure out, like, how did we get here? Where do we need to branch off and take a different path? And then I find that very interesting. And so I would love to hear from the community. Maybe just ping us on Twitter. Like, do you think we should do more of these kind of debugging stories or nah? And if you have any specific scenarios, that would also be interesting to hear.
I mean, if you ask people, like, should we do more? It's not that they're going to say no. It's like, of course, people want more, right?
Well, sometimes people at least tell us, yes, we want more, but not that. We want something different. So
okay. Yeah. So maybe you can debug which links are good for my website.
Can you debug why my website's not ranking? Like, no. Gary could.
It's not serving, Martin. You have to use the right terminology.
Yeah, why is the website not serving?
It's not serving nicely. Not serving cookies.
Not serving cookies properly. It has cookie banners that disrupt the page CLS score.
Cookie loading stats?
Cookie loading.
Okay.
Cookie loading schematic. There we go.
I mean, one of the topics that I always get questions on, especially in the German Hangouts, when I do them with the folks, is everything around internationalization. Maybe we can do something on that. What do you think?
The Germans want internationalization. That's very good. Internationalization is a big topic, and I think that causes lots of interesting situations. And I know that it also is a little bit related to serving. I don't know.
Yeah.
What is our take on hreflang these days?
I don't know. It's like one of those weird topics where when you read the documentation, you're like, oh, this all makes sense. It's like so easy. You just put this one link here on this German page, you put the other link on the French page, or you have a German for Germany and a German for Switzerland page, which is kind of awkward because they don't really speak German in Switzerland. But anyway, but you just add these links to your pages and then magically it all works out. And I don't know, it's one of those things where it's easy to point people at it and say, oh, it's like, just follow these guidelines and everything will work out. But it's sometimes really surprisingly complex. And I'm often surprised when people get things right with regards to hreflang because of all of the
Wait, what?
complexity.
When they get it right?
Yeah. I mean, it's like if you have a website, kind of connections between different versions of your pages, it's almost kind of tricky because like who knows which version is the French version of my page. You have different URLs, different URL structure, different people working on the different pages. It's like sometimes, I don't know, it gets really messy. So I think that's kind of tricky. And it's also really tricky with regards to our tools. Like if you just use Search Console to try to figure out, is my site's hreflang working properly? Because of the way Search Console reports on the indexed version of your pages, and indexing takes a while to process hreflang. It has this weird delay, and it brings up errors where when you look at the pages, you say, well, maybe Google just didn't see the proper hreflang at the time, but it's okay now. Like, what do I actually do here?
So maybe we could improve our tooling.
We could definitely improve our tooling. I think that's certainly one part, but maybe, I don't know. It's always one of those things where showing it to people, they think, oh, it makes sense and is easy to do. And then they start trying to do it and it gets really complicated. I keep wondering if there's some way to make it easier and less error prone, because as soon as something gets complicated and you don't have really cool or, I don't know, straightforward tools to diagnose it, then you just have to assume that there are lots of people out there implementing it in a way that is essentially incorrect, where you have, I don't know, the typical ES-LA for Latin America, Spanish.
Yeah.
And it like makes a lot of sense because maybe that's the code that you use internally for all of your Spanish pages for Latin America. But Google doesn't think that your page is Spanish for Laos or whatever. So it's, I don't know. It gets really complicated with all of those details.
I'm particularly fond of that example because that was in our own help center.
Oh, no. Okay.
That is amazing.
I think the last time I looked, we still have similar things where I forgot which country code, but it's also one of those things where we group a bunch of different countries together and just call it by some number or something like that. And we still have that in various places on our side too. And if Google can't get it right, then expecting other people to get it right is kind of tricky. And it's not something where if I know that it's super complicated to get right, where I feel really comfortable telling people to spend a lot of time on it because it takes a lot of time. It's hard to tell what exactly you will get out of it. And it's one of those tricky topics.
Yeah. I think the biggest problem with it is that it's complicated, but the complexity comes from a different angle than what we would expect. Because, for example, if you have a site where you have multiple languages and you have just one domain where you have multiple languages, basically just changing with agile equals language code, then implementing it is actually not that hard because it's very likely that you are using the same templating system and then you can just change the URLs in the hreflang cluster based on the parameter, for example. The complexity comes when you have completely different sites for different regions using completely different templating systems, and then you have to match up the URLs, perhaps using a spreadsheet or something, I don't even know. And then that is more prone to errors. But we also know that there are a large number of sites that make perfect use of hreflang. They implemented it correctly and they are reaping its benefits.
Yeah.
There are sites out there that messed up the hreflang clusters on their sites, but then we also know that there are a large number of sites who didn't, and they are benefiting from it.
Yeah, it's one of those things where if you get everything right, it seems to make sense. Two of the cases where I see where people make mistakes with regards to hreflang is, on the one hand, they look at the system and they see, oh, I can add all country codes, all language codes here. So therefore, I will make my website be international in all variations. And it's kind of tempting to just say, well, I can create the code to make all of these different language versions. But actually, from a ranking, from a search point of view, it probably doesn't make sense to just duplicate your whole site for all of these versions if you're not doing anything unique on all of those versions. So finding the right set of country and language versions that make sense for your website, that's sometimes super hard. There's no absolute answer for that. And the other thing is that I sometimes see people implementing hreflang purely across totally unrelated languages, where maybe you have a German page and a Chinese page, and you implement hreflang there. And to me, that feels a little bit like wasted effort, because if someone is searching in Chinese, we're not going to show them the German page, right? So it's more something where if there are actual issues that we're showing the wrong version, then obviously hreflang helps us to pick the right one. But if we're not having trouble understanding these different language versions, then maybe you don't even need to use hreflang. Would that be about correct, Gary?
Whoa. What? Why me?
You know everything around hreflang.
I mean, I worked on hreflang, but that doesn't mean that I know. That was a long time ago.
But you know more than me, so it's your turn.
I mean, conceptually, yes, it doesn't make sense. One of the ranking components that we implemented back then when we were actively working on hreflang was a swapping mechanism. So, for example, if you search for, I don't have examples anymore. I forgot about them. You search for something in Chinese, then if the German page would come up, then we would swap out the results. So I think that there's still a benefit. Like if you have matching content, just different languages, even if the script is different, it makes sense to annotate with hreflang. It might not make sense for all kind of content, but for certain content, it might make sense. Okay, so my Chinese is very rusty, but in Japanese, probably I can give you an example. They have a character set for imported words. So that would be a katakana. And there we could understand the underlying word, like, for example, banana. They don't have a word that they could express with kana, with kanji. So they use the katakana characters to express the word banana. And then we would be able to understand that this is the concept banana, the fruit. And then we could serve the English page. But then the English page doesn't make sense to serve for a Japanese user. So if there's a matching Japanese version, then we would swap them out. So in that context, it makes sense to have hreflang. But if someone is searching for something like, I don't know, knife making, then it probably wouldn't make sense to retrieve a German page and then swap out with the Japanese version.
Yeah. But I guess like brands would also fall into that. Like if you have an international brand name that you use in all kinds of countries, then that might also be something where your homepage or your category page or the product page, if it's a really popular product, could also benefit from that link between the different language versions, right?
Right. Yeah.
What about if I have the same product and pretty much the same product description and the same product name in between a German and a Swiss-German site or product page? Would it still make sense because the price is different, right? They're using different currencies. Switzerland has Swiss francs, Germany has euros. So even though the content is pretty much the same, would it still make sense to have an hreflang version for Switzerland versus Germany?
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, that's like one of the questions I get in the office hours all the time. And for that, it's something, it definitely makes sense. I think it's tricky because we have, at the same time, systems that try to understand when content is duplicated, and we try to put them into one cluster of pages. And then sometimes the German and the Swiss page will get into the same cluster. But with hreflang, we can show the proper URL at least. So that's, I think, pretty useful.
Yeah, I'm aggressively nodding here.
I think that's generally not a problem. It's just that also because of this, I mean, it makes sense that these are put together in the same dub cluster or duplication cluster because it's the same content essentially. But in the reporting, it can be tricky if the report is only reporting canonicals, because then it's like, oh, what happened to the Swiss page? That has disappeared because it's now a duplicate of the German page. But that doesn't mean that we are not showing the Swiss page to people in Switzerland.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think Search Console is super complicated in that regard. And it's something where people come with these questions, and because Search Console reports on the canonical, you basically have no idea what is actually happening. I mean, you have a bit of an idea. You can kind of guess and try to interpret it from there, but it's super tricky with regards to reporting in Search Console for those kind of international sites where we do kind of this duplication thing where we recognize it's the same content. So I don't envy people that have to do reporting on that, but at the same time, it's one of those topics in Search Console where we gain a lot by simplifying and focusing on the canonical, but for these kind of international sites, it makes it so much harder.
Yeah. Fascinatingly enough, that's roughly what I wanted to say too. I remember when Search Console was contemplating on switching to reporting on canonicals, and one of the biggest issues that we brought up was with hreflang, because hreflang relies a lot on alternate names or alternate URLs. And because of that, hreflang reporting would essentially break. And we've seen that happen, and people were not very happy about it. But as John said, greater good.
Yeah. I guess it also brings up the question of like, what else could we use instead of hreflang if we wanted to switch to something else? And I came up with a fantastic system. And for some reason, that didn't get implemented. It kind of relied on regular expressions and content hashes. And I thought that would be like so much simpler than these link tags that you put into HTML. But I don't know, Gary, why are you facepalming?
I'm not facepalming. My head hurts.
Gary, we can make that sound more reasonable.
It just started.
We can make that proposal sound more reasonable by proposing an alternative variation that uses blockchain.
No. Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things where Gary has also asked externally and internally. It's like, so how could we simplify all of this hreflang thing so that you still have the value, but it's easier to implement, it's easier to get reporting on? I don't have the magic answer, apart from that really cool proposal with regular expressions and content hashes. But if anyone out there has cool ideas or interesting ideas, like make sure to send them our way.
Yeah, absolutely. We would be super happy to take it internally, because if we can simplify it, then that would be fantastic. One thing that I think we should caution for is that the solution should work for all kinds of implementations. Like, for example, the thing that we touched upon was the same site. It's just you are changing a parameter to swap the template or the language in the template. It has to work on that, but also on completely different sites as well. And the suggestions that we got usually fail this criterion. And we just can't do that. Like, for example, we can't have a system that works only for certain kinds of sites, because that would mean that the internet has to change for following that implementation, which just doesn't make much sense.
Well, it could happen. It was like we change something and say that we should do it. But yeah, it's, I don't know, super tricky.
Let's say that I'm not in favor of that.
Okay, so you're saying search is hard.
Well, it's super simple for me. I don't understand what you're talking about.
Yeah, John, it's just a text field. You type in a query and hit return, and then you get results. How is that hard? I don't understand.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. Whew, so many topics.
You can even use voice search if you don't want to type anything.
Voice search. Yeah, we should do one of these about voice search and reporting in Search Console. What do you think?
Oh, that's a quick episode. That's going to be a really quick episode. Treat it just like a different way of entering the query. Moving on.
Okay, cool. Fine. Maybe we should take a break here.
Maybe.
Okay. Thank you for joining us here, folks. It's been great having you here and listening in on these podcast episodes. We've been having fun, at least. We hope you found them both entertaining and a little bit insightful as well. Regardless, let us know how you're liking these. If there's anything that we should be including to make them more useful or more interesting for you, make sure to let us know. And, of course, don't forget to like and subscribe and update all of your links to point to the new Google Search Central site. All right. Thanks, everyone, and bye.
Ciao.
Au revoir.